You can answer.
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if we're live. Are we live?
Yeah, we're live. Yeah, we're live.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just tell you, I have, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I know what this whole Q thing is. I think it's just sheer nonsense.
Oh boy. So this is Michael Flynn in the bottom right corner, John Enloe in the top right corner. Michael Flynn is lauded as a QAnon hero, and Johnny Enloe is lauded as kind of the linchpin between Christianity and QAnon. He's very much a QAnon pastor. Getting these two on the same live stream together at the same time is a pretty big deal. Johnny Enloe is probably just over the moon with the fact that he gets to talk to Michael Flynn in the first place, because Flynn was specifically a large part of the QAnon lore. Now, I'm assuming you have very little or no knowledge about QAnon here, so I'll explain little things as we go along in case somebody's watching who's unfamiliar. But QAnon is just this ideology that is completely insane, like unhinged from reality stuff that has all kinds of weird beliefs about the cabal controlling kids and Donald Trump is here to save the world and all kinds of absolutely unhinged stuff. So anyway, they get on the same live stream together, these two major players within QAnon, and the interaction is something else, dude. The interesting thing about it, though, as you could hear a minute ago, Michael Flynn tried to deny QAnon completely. But that was a totally different tone than what he had in July 2020. The guy went out there and gave a QAnon oath in front of the world with his family. Originally, he latched on to QAnon. He accepted it. He wanted to be a part of it, wanted to be a leader in QAnon. I mean, listen to the oath here.
I, Jack Flynn, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
It sounds like a normal oath, but it's different. It's tweaked just a little bit.
So help me God. Where we go one, we go all. God bless America.
This oath specifically was famously given by like a ton of people all over the internet, a bunch of QAnoners, all at the same time around this time, like July 2020, roughly. And Michael Flynn comes out here and does it himself, thus signaling his support of the QAnon movement. So now we're listening to him say, I don't know what you're talking about. But that's not the tone he had before. He was so influential within QAnon when it was really, getting its feet under it and really blowing up, that QAnoners were looking to him for information. They were looking to him for advice, for leadership and guidance. And he goes on this TV show, The Right Side with Doug Billings, right? He goes on this podcast or whatever, and was asked some specific questions about QAnon ideology. Listen to how he answered the questions.
I'm just going to ask you some questions, and I want you to just tell me if it's nonsense or if there was anything to it at all. Number one, did President Trump ever sign into action the Insurrection Act?
No.
This is part of QAnon's ideology. They believed that Trump did this. So looking to Flynn as their military leader effectively. He is the leader of the white hat military, as they call it. And this is the answer that he gives. No.
Insurrection Act?
No. Nonsense.
Nonsense. Is the United States military running the country or just is that nonsense as well?
More nonsense.
Good to hear.
More nonsense. There's no plan. There's so many people out there. Is the plan happening? We have what we have, and we have to accept the situation as it is.
So when he said that, it threw a wrench into QAnon entirely. It was a big deal. And QAnon influencers and interpreters across the political landscape came out of the woodwork trying to interpret what Michael Flynn was saying. They wanted to understand, what was going on. He's completely contradicting what the leader of QAnon, this guy calls himself Q Clearance Patriot, he's contradicting what he said. Now, a lot of people thought Flynn was the Q Clearance Patriot poster, the guy who started QAnon in the first place. And he's contradicting him directly. So this QAnon interpreter known as the Praying Medic, aka Dave Hayes, comes out there immediately after that interview and addresses what Flynn had to say in that interview. Listen to this one, mid-February 2021.
Some people have heard the interview with General Flynn, where General Flynn said that there is no plan for the military to step in. I was listening to Monkey Works, and he interviewed a guy a couple days ago, and that guy also said there is no plan for the military to step in and do anything. Well, I would like to suggest an alternative viewpoint on that. If the military had a plan to intervene in American politics, and General Flynn was aware of it, I guarantee you he wouldn't tell anybody what he knew publicly.
Dude can't accept it.
For operational security.
He can't accept it. He can't accept that Flynn is telling him this is nonsense. It's BS. Don't believe it. I mean, QAnon listed Flynn as one of the leaders, and now Flynn is denouncing it, denying it, and telling people to stop being so gullible, basically. And there's a massive conflict in these people's minds. So here's where it gets interesting. Just the other day, December 15th, 2022, Flynn goes on this live stream with a guy named Johnny Enloe, and they have a long, drawn-out conversation about this, and oh my God, did it get wild. Now, before we watch the actual live stream, let me tell you about Michael Flynn and QAnon just a little bit. Just want to give a little bit of preliminary information here to establish some facts here. Michael Flynn was charged and sentenced with a crime not too long ago, and pardoned for that crime by Donald Trump before he left office. So what did Michael Flynn do? Well, it was a number of things. He was acting in service to other governments, namely Turkey, without disclosing that to anybody, without telling anybody that he was serving these countries over the United States military. He was not supposed to be doing something like that. But the thing that really gets me more than anything is, in 2014, Russia invaded Crimea, a part of Ukraine, right? And naturally, Obama, who was in office at the time, put sanctions on Russia for that. Oddly, Russia didn't respond to those sanctions. They didn't say a word. Nobody said anything, which made absolutely no sense. If there's one thing we know about Russia, it's that they whine and scream and cry like they're being mistreated when they're the ones that are actively harming people. So upon a little more investigation, it's found out that Michael Flynn said he spoke to Donald Trump, and when Trump takes office, if he takes office, he's going to lift those sanctions for Vladimir Putin. Michael Flynn contacted Putin and told him that. So what happened? Putin didn't say a word, didn't even care about the sanctions. He just waited it out. And when Trump took office, sure enough, Trump lifted the sanctions. He directly acted to undermine the authority of the United States president. That is a big deal. That's, in my mind, treasonous action, as far as I'm concerned. Like, that's treason. I mean, I don't think that technically fits the definition, because Russia is not a country that we're at war with. They're not, like, officially considered an enemy. They're just an adversarial nation. But for all intents and purposes, it's treason, in my opinion. So take that for what you will. The other piece of information I wanted to give you before we watch this is just a little background about QAnon. QAnon, for those who are totally unfamiliar with it, this is going to be like a 30-second explanation. QAnon is just a group that formed out, I think in 2017, on a message board called 4chan originally. It operates kind of like Reddit, where anybody can go there and anonymously post anything that they want, pretty much. So this guy who called himself Q Clearance Patriot, again, completely anonymous officially, goes to 4chan and starts making posts about how Hillary Clinton is about to be arrested in the next day, and all you have to do to verify this is talk to a National Guardsman and ask for their orders and blah, blah, blah. Of course, it never actually happened. It was complete nonsense from day one, but it blew up on 4chan. It exploded. Eventually, Q Clearance Patriot continued on to post more and more and more stuff, and it was very hit or miss. mostly leaning on the myth side. They were making predictions that were almost like prophecies, claiming to be an insider in the government, claiming to have secret information about the cabal, the deep state, this shadowy group that was pulling strings and making things happen behind the scenes. And this Q clearance patriot is really, really high up in the government, and they're, trying to set things right, basically. That's how it was framed. Eventually, they went on to move to a different website called 8chan, and then 8chan got shut down and blah, blah, blah. They claimed that Trump was guaranteed to win the 2020 election, and then he didn't. I don't know why anybody believed this, but it exploded overnight in right-wing circles. And the Q clearance patriot specifically mentioned Michael Flynn as one of the most influential people in the movement, kind of making it out like he was one of the top leaders that was pulling strings and making sure that Trump got into office and stuff. That's generally what QAnon is. Before we continue, I just wanted to mention something. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. Or you can check out my Telltale Unfiltered channel. I go through long-form, unhinged sermons from all kinds of people, from Hank Kunneman to Greg Locke to Jehovah's Witnesses. So give it a look. Links are in the description. Okay, now back to the video. So with that information in mind, let's watch this clip of Michael Flynn interacting with this Johnny Enloe guy, this linchpin between QAnon and Christianity. Check this out, December 15th, 2022.
So I understand you as a general and your background in intel as well, that you're not necessarily called to disseminate real intel to us, but rather, this is my perspective, but rather supply appropriate words to the troops for where we're at and the things that are needed.
So, i.e., what he's saying is he expects Michael Flynn to lie to them, but that's okay. He's intentionally not telling the truth to try to push things in the direction that he wants them to go, basically, for the greater good. That's what Johnny Enloe believes. Okay?
Things that are needed. You were essentially revealed to us by Q. I didn't know who you were. I followed, it was because of prophetic words I was giving that people say, you must have heard of Q. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. So,
and Johnny, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh boy. Yeah, as it turns out, Michael Flynn really doesn't like QAnon anymore. He has tried desperately to distance himself from it.
Okay. So let me just keep saying.
Look at Clay Clark laughing in the corner. So the guy that owns this platform, Steve Schultz, in the top left here, this is the Elijah List. It's the name of the Facebook page. He owns it, and he is also a QAnoner. So this reaction is so interesting to watch, to see how these two QAnoners are reacting to Flynn, who is so well respected in the QAnon community, just shredding him.
What you're talking about.
Okay. So let me just keep saying, as you say that, I'll just say, because it goes with the rest of my question. You were essentially revealed to us by Q, trust the plan, patriots in control. It was over before it's began. There was continual references to you. Who knows where the bodies are buried?
Right now, he's reading from a Q post, is what they call it. Q posted about Michael Flynn, in this big, long, who knows where the bodies are hidden and all this other garbage. It's all nonsensical riddles that don't even really lead to anything. It's intentionally vague to try to get people to, decipher it and come up with these weird conspiracies out of it. That's basically the idea. Clay Clark in the bottom left corner here, he runs something called the Reawaken America Tour, and he has a lot of famous people on that tour with him. They show up to places and they give speeches. Michael Flynn's one of them. He gives speeches at Reawaken America all the time. Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump. I think Donald Trump himself has been at these tours to give speeches and stuff. Clay Clark was a QAnoner up until the moment that COVID spread all through one of his tours. Everybody at one of his events got really sick with COVID, and some of them even died, some really high-up influencers. And the QAnoners in the audience at this event claimed that there was an anthrax attack on this event. It's complete nonsense. But I think that's probably where Clay Clark soured to QAnon. And that's probably why he was laughing when Johnny Enloe was getting shredded. I don't think that's really funny. He doesn't have to be a D-bag to him, right? Like, he can lay it on the line and say QAnon is nonsense without being a jerk, but whatever.
And then, but what I do hear from you is no one's coming to rescue you. If anything, I'd even written in my notes, if anything, a denial that there is Q and all, and I'm fine. I don't want you to, that's not the question.
Then why did he bring it up? He knew what Flynn's reaction was going to be to this. It's going to be negative.
You can answer
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if we're live. Are we live?
Yeah, we're live. Yeah, we're live.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just tell you, I have, I don't know what you're talking about.
So I watched through this whole thing on my Unfiltered YouTube channel, Telltale Unfiltered, and the entire breakdown is releasing this week, or may have already released. So if you want to see the whole thing, like beginning to end, it was like a 3-hour event or something, and I break it into like 1-hour chunks. Just check my Telltale Unfiltered YouTube channel. Should be releasing today, yesterday, day before. Up to this point, I think Flynn had been talking for 30 minutes at least. We're 30 minutes into the stream. Flynn was communicating with all of these people for like, forever. He knew they were live. The point of him saying, I don't know if we're live, are we live, seems to me is to at the very least imply that he's about to say something that the public should hear, but he's not going to say anything that he doesn't want the public to hear, i.e., maybe he does believe in QAnon secretly, but he doesn't want to say that publicly. That's the impression that I get. Now, does he actually believe in QAnon? No. I don't think he believes in QAnon for a single second. He was way too high up in government to actually believe any of this garbage. He probably knows exactly who Q Clearance Patriot is. I would be willing to bet. But he wants people listening to believe that he has a secret message or a secret knowledge that, they don't have, for example. FYI, Q Clearance Patriot is already known. We know exactly who it is. We have for a while now. It started out as Paul Ferber and maybe had some influence from a woman named Tracy Beans Diaz. And when it moved over to 8chan, it was taken over by Ron and Jim Watkins, the owners of the website 8chan. That's neither here nor there. Completely unrelated, but it was a little fun fact I thought you'd want. Okay, let's keep listening here.
I mean, I know what this whole Q thing is. I think it's just sheer nonsense.
Okay, well,
it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I mean, you see all the idiocy all over the internet, and these people that think that there's some white knight coming. There's no white knight coming.
I understand you saying that, but I can also show you, if we went it down that right, about 20 retruth things that President Trump does where he validates Q in some way. So,
okay, what he's talking about is something called deltas in the QAnon movement. They call them deltas. Now, in math, a delta is basically I think it's like a distance between two things. In this case, the delta that Johnny Enloe is referring to is the amount of time between when Donald Trump references a subject and when the Q Clearance Patriot poster references a subject. So, for example, Donald Trump mentions Michael Flynn going to Africa, and 12 seconds before, Q Clearance Patriot makes a post about Michael Flynn going to Africa, or something like that. It doesn't even get that specific most of the time. That is easily attributed to Ron Watkins, who we're very confident is posting as Q Clearance Patriot. It's attributable to Ron Watkins watching Donald Trump's post history and realizing that Donald Trump posts things at 7 in the morning when he gets up and he's in the bathroom. Perfect time to post if you want a really good delta, and just kind of scroll through the news and see what's popping out at you. Michael Flynn was in the news about him doing this thing or that thing. Better post about Michael Flynn. I bet if you do that enough over the course of, say, 6 months to a year, Q Clearance Patriot's been posting since 2017, you can rack up some really close deltas, right? There's nothing spectacular or amazing about any of this, but that's the conspiracy mindset. Everything contributes to the conspiracy. There is no evidence that the conspiracy is real. Well, that's just because the bad guys covered it up. There's actually evidence against the conspiracy existing. That's because they framed somebody else. They set it up to look like it wasn't real, to throw you off their trail. and there is evidence in favor of the conspiracy, well, there you go. Literally everything contributes to their belief that these conspiracies are real, whether there is no evidence, evidence contrary to it, or evidence in favor of it. It's all evidence in favor of it. That's how it works.
Q in some way. So it's
Ask
all right.
him about Q then.
I'm not asking you about Q. This is not a question about Q. So the question is this, right?
Why did he even bring Q up then? Michael Flynn did not have to be a D-bag to Johnny Enloe. I'm really unhappy about that. Like, I have no emotional investment in this, but why is Flynn a D-bag like this? There's no need. But aside from that, why did Johnny Enloe bring it up in the first place? He knew what this reaction was going to be like.
Is this. Right now, there is real weariness in what we would call the patriot community. Trump announced that he had a major announcement today. And in the major announcement, it is the sale of a, what do you call the
digital playing cards?
Digital, and he's a Trump thing. And so there is...
So QAnon is trying to work the NFTs into their ideology and figure out how this fits. And Johnny Enloe decided to take the opportunity to ask Michael Flynn directly. Wow.
You know, the assumption that
whoever advised him on that, I'd fire him immediately.
Okay. I was going to say there's either some comms going on, there's some communication, because
another thing about QAnon, they try to use military language like comms. They use military shorthand. It's just ridiculous, dude. They're such LARPers. It's just awful, dude. It's awful.
Communication, because it strikes the patriot community.
Plus for a period of time. So I'm gonna jump in, Johnny, because I don't know what direction you're taking. Well, man, because I don't know what direction you're going, but I can tell you what direction I'm going to take. And I think people are gullible because they're looking for something. Why does this even occur if the churches are preaching the Constitution and preaching the Bible and talking about what we need to do to get this country revived again? Because I'm going to tell you, Christianity is lost in America. It is totally lost. We have lost sight of what this country was built upon.
Okay, like I have no idea what any of this has to do with anything. Johnny Enloe asked a specific question. What should the real patriots, quote unquote, do to get this country back on track? And he's just going off about all kinds of nonsense.
So, which is what? Go ahead and answer what is it built upon? You said they're directly misaligned.
Yeah, a set of Judeo-Christian principles and values. Yeah, a set of Judeo-Christian principles and values. I mean, you know, the persecution of Christians in Europe from 1500, 1600, 1700, you know.
Okay. Does he think that Christians were the ones that were being persecuted by and large in the Middle Ages through the Renaissance and all the way up to like now, basically? He thinks that the Christians were the ones being persecuted, not the other way around. I mean, I feel like I remember something about like the Crusades and the way that the Catholic Church excommunicated people all through from the year 400 all the way to now. It's on the tip of my tongue. Something happened, right? Weren't Christians like largely in power throughout Europe for a lot of this? Okay, that was the end of it. These people are so like revisionist history doesn't even begin to describe what they're doing here. They're just making things up whole cloth. Like everything that they say is complete nonsense. So a little time passes between that interaction and the next one. Like I don't remember, like 5-10 minutes passes or something, and they kind of got off on another subject. And then they come back to the QAnon stuff, and Michael Flynn is once again a D-bag for no reason. Listen to this.
You're asking Americans to do everything possible other than take up arms. And if it was at absolute desperate levels, like in the 1776 and previous before revolution, there is a time where the only solution is to take up arms. But I understand that is not one of your recommendations. And I know there's...
Okay, I don't know what brought him to that conclusion. He watches Michael Flynn a lot closer than I do, so maybe he knows something about Flynn that I don't. But I have not once heard Michael Flynn discourage people from picking up arms. I thought Flynn was kind of in favor of like militarizing the right, basically. Maybe not. Okay.
Frustration because a top recommendation was get involved in the elections, do everything you can, and they see no justice, no point for it at all.
I want to talk about reality. I want to talk about reality,
you,
Johnny. Okay, not mythical or mysterious things that nobody has a clue who they are or what they are, and it's all a bunch of garbage.
It's not your primary message. That's why I know you're on assignment.
Wow, dude. Honestly, he didn't have to be like that. He could have been nicer. Like, Johnny Enloe has some really weird and confusing beliefs, but he didn't have to be a jerk, right?
But do you have any encouragement for the Patriots of what could happen as they continue to wait if they do what they can do?
Yeah.
So basically, what should the quote-unquote Patriots do? Like, what active thing can they do right now to, like, alleviate their stress that things are not getting better? Or how can they move things in the right direction? He's asked this like 16 times, and Flynn just keeps telling him he's an idiot for believing in QAnon.
Yeah. So number one, don't believe the kind of garbage that's on the internet.
Oh my God. Fantastic. Yes. Oh my God. I am so on board. Don't believe the garbage about QAnon. Oh, but believe the garbage coming out of Flynn's mouth, of course. You have to believe that garbage. And again, like, if you want to see this whole thing, it's all broken down on my Unfiltered channel. But Clay Clark here, a minute or two later, or a minute or two before, I don't remember exactly when, comes on and then starts spouting off nonsense about people who got vaccinated, had a chip implanted in them. This has already happened, apparently, in his mind. And this chip is broadcasting 5G signals that blankets the world and blah, 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 blah. Like, all of this nonsense about, chips and one world government and everything else. And here Flynn sits telling his people, don't believe the garbage you hear on the internet. The problem is that the audience fundamentally doesn't know how to decipher between, or they don't know how to figure out what is garbage and what isn't. If they knew how to decipher which things were garbage and which weren't, they wouldn't be watching you, of all people.
Believe the kind of garbage that's on the internet, okay, that's out there. I mean, unless you can touch it, feel it, and it's going to impact your physical daily life in your existence and what you're doing around your own community.
That doesn't even really make any sense, because a lot of the QAnon claims they believe will affect their existence directly like that. I mean, they won't, but just like they believe they had a chip injected in them that's transmitting 5G and all that stuff. They believe that stuff. Flynn's okay with that being spread around, but not the QAnon stuff.
One of the things about, because you mentioned it earlier when I jumped on you about, this Q nonsense.
Enloe is smiling here because he feels like this is Flynn kind of throwing some scraps at him, right? Like, he's acknowledging that he was a D-bag to him. But this isn't really a point in Enloe's favor. He's not really apologizing. He's not asking for forgiveness or anything. He's just pointing out, I treated it like garbage. Plain and simple. There's no reason for Enloe to be happy about this situation. Flynn is still a D-bag for no reason. Like, I don't get it. Do people think that being a D-bag accomplishes anything at all? Does he think that this is going to wake people up from the nonsense land that they live in? Does he think it's going to pull people away from QAnon by trashing them, by treating them like garbage and making them feel like idiots? I honestly don't think this is helping anybody by being a jerk like this. Like, when people feel attacked, they shut down. It's called the backfire effect. They stop thinking about it. They stop communicating. They stop putting critical thought into anything if they ever did in the first place. It's not helpful. Being a jerk like this does not help anybody with anything.
The plan, right? I mean, plans, I don't know what, I've heard that so often. I'm like, man, if there was a plan, if there were white hats and all this other garbage.
Yeah, they call the people that work with QAnon inside the military, they call them the white hat military. It's all nonsense. It doesn't exist.
You think that our country would be in the state of that it's in right now if there was something positive happening, Johnny? No, it would not be. So this is not about fear. This is about action.
So his whole idea, he went off on a weird tangent that made absolutely no sense from here about how people should believe in God and that'll solve all the problems. I don't even know what he was trying to accomplish with this, but yeah. I would say this was probably less than satisfactory on Johnny Enloe's part, and I lost even more respect for Flynn after this, if that's even possible. He's absolutely terrible. All these people are complete suckers. They fell for the garbage. They ate it up hook, line, and sinker, and it's honestly sad to see. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you want to see more stuff like this in the comments.